I'm so excited for my daddy's podcast, and it's going to start right now.
Welcome to Volume 2 of the Lessons for Success show, the podcast heard by nearly 3,000 students, teachers, coaches, and others across the world. I'm your host, Adam Wardlaw, a middle school science teacher and high school football coach in South Carolina, USA. The goal of each episode is to share the stories of various people and the life lessons they've learned along their journeys. Before we get started, be sure you're following the show on all of our social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and yes, even TikTok. Simply search L4S Show. Just remember, it's the number 4. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Lessons for Success Show YouTube channel, where all episodes are uploaded. If you're an educator, coach, or business leader, feel free to send the links to these episodes directly to your students or employees so they can benefit as well. Without further ado, let's start the show.
Daddy, who's the guest on your podcast this week?
This week's guest is Coach Eric Marty. Coach Marty is the head coach at Reedley College in California. The 2018 Golden Coast Conference Coach of the Year is entering his 4th season at Reedley College. And after a 10-1 season, conference championship, and bowl game in 2018, he has brought the history-rich Tiger football program to its rightful status as one of the premier junior college programs in the country. In this episode, we look at Coach Marty's journey in life and what he feels is the most important aspect organizations can have in order to reach their full potential. Enjoy!
Appreciate you having me on. My name is Eric Marty, and I grew up in Edmonds, Washington, just outside Seattle. I'm currently the head coach at Reedley College, so we're a junior college just south of Fresno in Central California, about 30 miles. We're an ag town. Our moniker is the fruit basket, not of the USA, but the fruit basket of the world. So, obviously that kind of shapes our area. But one thing we're very fortunate is we have dorms on campus, and so that's a rarity for California junior colleges, and kind of allowed us to build the program the way or gives us a lot of flexibility in how we do it. And Josh Allen, the starting quarterback from the Buffalo Bills, he started our program a couple years before I got there. But so that gives us some national notoriety as well. But growing up, sports nut, played a lot of different sports, and I won't dive too much into the nitty gritty, but the biggest thing is, I like most guys, I did just about everything on just God-given ability, and you have enough success where you just think you're that guy. And I remember sitting watching a Mariners game in the outfield, just so certain I was going to be the shortstop for the Mariners, just because, I was who I was. And so was an okay football player, was a pretty good soccer player, and I ended up getting switched to goalie on our high school soccer team and made an all-state team, and we won state my senior year, and I was the Washington State 3A soccer player of the year. And I really hadn't put that much work into it. And so ended up playing Division III football at Chapman University because, like I said, I was just kind of an okay player. But, I was coming off this incredible run of high school success and just going through the natural progression that everybody goes through, where you're at the top of the totem pole, you're reading articles about yourself in the local papers and different things like that. And then I get down to a mediocre Division III program at the time, and I cannot get on the field. I'm not playing well. I can't throw the ball consistently. My mechanics were all screwed up, and so I think that's the kind of the moment that every athlete faces at some time, whether they can't make the varsity team or maybe they get to the NFL and all of a sudden they're struggling for the first time. But there comes a breaking point where you have to make a decision how important it is to you. And so that was the thing for me. I got to my freshman year. It was just like most freshmen, just a miserable year, didn't play. And so I really recommitted myself to, what essentially my goals were. I wanted to be a great college quarterback, and I didn't care that I was a D3 guy, not a D1. None of that mattered. I just I didn't just want to be a starter at Chapman University. I wanted to be remembered as, a great, one of the great players there. And we were, additionally, we weren't a very good, we were 2-8, I think my freshman year, 3-7, something like that. So I just didn't want to be a starter on a bad D3 team. I wanted to be a good player and in a good program. And so, really kind of step back and revamp my work ethic and different things like that. And that kind of set the foundation for my career. And I really believe that I had the ability, and I looked at the other guys around me, and I felt like, if I just could outwork people and I was more talented, then surely I would win the job. And so there was definitely no straight line to that success, but eventually that success showed up, and I was able to start my last 3 years down at Chapman and graduated with some school records, and we turned the program around, got to a point where we were 7-3, 6-4 in my last couple of years, which was a big step, and they've gone on to a lot bigger and better. But, foundationally, that was just kind of the eureka moment, the epiphany that I think I'm fortunate to have, that I really rooted my success to the fact that I was going to work really hard and saw the correlation to it.
I'm sure now it's pretty interesting for you being on the other side of it. You're the head coach of a college football team, and I'm sure you see a lot of guys coming in now who maybe think of themselves on that totem pole, but they're going, they hit that wall like you kind of said you went through. Is there anything you do in your program, or what are some things you kind of emphasize with your guys to help guide them through that moment where they're trying to figure out their way, kind of like you had to do?
Yeah, well, I even remember dating back to my days at Chapman as I kind of climbed through the program and seen other freshmen struggle, how beneficial I thought it would be if they just periodically sat freshmen down, whether and had coaches or former players or current players, just speak life into that group and just pull them aside and say, hey, listen, I know freshman year sucks, because we always see the 1 of 1%, the freshman All-American receiver at Oklahoma, but for everybody else's freshman year experience, it's what you're going through right now. And there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we still believe in you. We still love you. Those different things. So we have a Marty talk a team coaches meeting, or a team meeting basically every Wednesday in season, and then as well as in the off season, where we talk a lot of culture stuff, but a lot of it's that. And so one thing I've kind of learned is you need to have an orientation for everything. I think at every level, I always say at the JC level, but I think it's applicable to every level. And so we're talking how to sit in class, how to study, how to write an essay, weight room expectations, how to just function in a collegiate football program, what the expectations are. We try and make sure that we have various orientations, because the one thing I've learned is, you may come from a great high school program where everybody was early, you had meetings, guys lifted hard. You also may be coming from a program where the head coach was late to practice, nobody lifted, et cetera, et cetera. So I always use the analogy. It's like if you're trying to teach a math class, and some guys can just add and subtract, and other guys, are doing advanced trigonometry. Well, you can't teach that class. You have to bring that baseline up, so everybody's kind of starting from the same platform, and now you can advance that group. But so those are some of the things, and I just the biggest piece is just guys need to know that you believe in them, and I think if you can build that systematically into your program, it's not dependent on you as a coach to have your finger on the pulse of 80 guys. You give the message out to the group, and you give the message out to that freshman class, and then we try and show them examples all the time, which examples are everywhere. If you Players Tribune and all these different places have these great articles that are published, guys talking about their struggle, what they went through, all those different things. So that's some of the ideas we've had in our program.
A lot of the things you mentioned, for the football coaches out there, they're obviously jotting it down, soaking it all up. But in my head, I'm thinking that these things you guys are doing, and I see other colleges doing, they apply to other walks of life as well. The teachers and principals and school leaders out there that are listening, and the business leaders that listen to the podcast. Some of the things you're talking about doing also, it kind of seems like it could transcend into their areas as well. If you kind of had to give those non-football coaches, a word of advice for just helping their organizations run better, what would that word of advice be?
Well, I think the thing that everybody's struggling with, whether it's football or other walks and other professions, and my buddies in HR, recruiting, Amazon, the annual Amazon careers or tenure there is like less than 2 years, and so I always say continuity is the most valuable asset in any organization. And back to the football piece, you look at Drew Brees versus Alex Smith. One guy shows up to camp every year and he goes from level 100 to 200 to 300 to 400. Now he's on level, 1,500 versus one guy every year has got note cards trying to learn formations. It's the same thing in business. And so if the more you can accommodate people and make them feel comfortable, and then also show them the pattern of growth in your organization, I think the significantly greater chance that person is going to continue with you, not get frustrated, not go search greener grass elsewhere. And I show a millennial video. It's Simon, I can't remember his last name, but it's a pretty popular YouTube video. It's kind of a talk show deal, and he's sitting talking about the millennial issue and talks about how everybody wants to be at the top of the mountain. Everybody wants to be a CEO of a nonprofit, but nobody wants to put the time and the work or has the patience for those things to manifest. And so you really need to explain and show them examples of, hey, this is the process of how it's going to work here. This is the mountain you're going to climb. It's going to take time. It's going to be hard, but you're going to get there. Because now everything's so transparent, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's Football Scoop, all we see is people's climb. And all we do is just wonder why that can't be us. Oh my gosh, that person on Instagram, they're already, this entrepreneur, they have money or they have this, or, oh my gosh, he's a coach at, whatever FBS school and he's 2 years younger than me. What the heck am I doing wrong? Or why isn't this working out for me? And so, again, it's just important that you peel back the layers to what that thing actually looks like. And then part of it's understanding that most of the time, if you see someone young who's doing something spectacular, it's an anomaly. And for the other 99% of us, our path is our path and we need to embrace it, and it's equally valid. And yeah, so those are some of the things. But again, just the big thing is, from an organizational standpoint, is you have to get people to kind of buy into and see that they're not going to be in this remedial introductory role forever, especially if they have talent, you believe in them. So those are some things I'd say.
It's funny, you kind of were talking about how people see, these few people with all the things that they've kind of done in a seemingly short amount of time. I teach middle school, so there's about 100 cases a day where I see, little Johnny wants to be a professional football player, just like, you name it, Tom Brady, or, Susie wants to be a dancer on Broadway in New York. And, one thing I came across with them, and I shared with them one time, is the iceberg effect, where when we see somebody that's kind of in those spotlights, we're seeing them at the top of that iceberg that's out in the ocean. What we don't see is how much larger the iceberg actually is that's underneath the water, that's not visible to us. And what that is the years and, however long it took them to get to where they got. We're just seeing their results and not necessarily their process. And so, it's great to hear that you're kind of, coaching your guys up, and hopefully the people out there listening kind of realize that they need to be focusing on the process and with their people, and showing them examples of how what they're doing is going to help. You don't know when, you don't know that timetable like you mentioned, but you just know it's going to happen at some point. Coach, I appreciate your time. One thing I like to do to kind of wrap up these interviews is, if you could just kind of sum up, and you may have already mentioned it before, but if you could kind of sum up in, just a few words, if there was a key to success out there for the people who are listening, what would that be? What would it kind of look like? What do people need to be doing in their everyday lives, in your own words?
Yeah, I think people too often conflate their goals with outcomes. So, outcomes are something, or, most people's goals is I want to sell X amount in a year, or I want to I want to win 10 games, or I want to throw for 3,000 yards. And those are outcomes. Those are a product of you alluded to it, the process, the work you put in. And so to me, I've gotten to a point where we try and turn those things outcomes. And what your goal should be that I'm going to make, 100 sales calls today, or I'm going to go, whatever your daily process is for working out at your position or getting your field work in or whatever it may be. So I think when people begin to take those goals and realize that those goals are outcomes and a byproduct of whether or not they accomplish what they need to do today, think your existential fears go away. You can relax a little bit, and also you're going to put the work in necessary. And, kind of the last thing I'd add is you alluded to it with, your iceberg comments and everything else. I mean, and I've gotten better at this as I've gotten older. We got to enjoy the ride, and it's hard when, you're not in the job or position or everything you want. But, how many times do we hear after the fact that somebody's wildly successful and they're not necessarily happy? We had all this success, but it was one of the worst times of my life. Like, that makes no sense. And so we need to make sure that, while we're doing all these things, we find a peace of mind and a place where we can enjoy where we're at with who we're with. And, I struggle with that, and just like everybody else at times, but, being in that place and enjoying the ride, because we aren't going to be back here, someday. Hopefully we'll all have made it, and we'll miss these days. So just be able to put things in perspective. But the bottom line is, if you're going to accomplish things down the road, you have to have an idea of what you need to do today, and don't worry about things beyond today.
Coach, I appreciate your time. If anybody out there is listening that wanted to get in touch with you or be able to keep up with you guys and what you're doing, what's kind of some ways that they could be reaching out to you, or some channels they can be following you on in order to keep up with you guys?
Yeah. So Twitter's, really the best way. So our football program is at Reedley CFB, and then my Twitter account's at Coach Eric Marty. And then if anybody ever wants to shoot me an email, you can find me on the Reedley College website, but it's eric.marty@reedleycollege.edu. So really appreciate you having me on, Coach, and giving me the opportunity to sit down and speak with you.
Daddy, I'm learning so much from this podcast.
I appreciate the time Coach Marty took in order to join me on the show, and I thought his perspective provided some great lessons we can all learn from. Let's review this lesson for success. In our conversation, Coach Marty described how continuity in your organization can be a major component of reaching its full potential. You've got to be willing to put in the work on a consistent basis. Too many people are focused on results instead of the process. We discussed the iceberg effect, where you may see and envy others because of their accomplishments. What we're witnessing in those moments is simply the result of all their hard work behind the scenes. Coach Marty mentioned that if you see anyone that appears to be having great success at a young age, that's simply an anomaly. You've got to expect that it's going to take you a consistent approach and high work ethic in order to reach your desired results. That's it for this episode of the Lessons for Success podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to screenshot the episode and share it on social media. Before you close the app, be sure you subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to also tune into the daily episodes of the show, as well as some of the past interviews we've had with a variety of guests. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time on the Lessons for Success Show podcast.